Hey everyone, welcome back. It should be pretty obvious based on the title of this video, but there will be loose Zariman spoilers in this video. If you don't want to see that, then I would strongly recommend clicking off and finishing the quest first. Also, because of how intricate Incarnon systems are, there will be a fair amount of theory crafting today. You have been warned. Otherwise, welcome to another build video where we take a look at our newest rifle, the Phenmor. This is one of our 3 Incarnon weapons included in the Angels update. It's currently the strongest rifle in the game and incredibly fun to play. While it has some unique quirks, you'll be surprised to know that despite all the new features in these weapons, the Phenmor is actually fully functional and not bugged in any way with regards to modding and damage calculations. Wow, good job DE. Also, yes, it does reverse spool and then Incarnon mode and slows down as you hold it longer. That's intentional. It's like an overheat mechanic. Anyways, the Phenmor costs 15 pinions and 20 quills, and 15 lanthorns to craft, so if you haven't done that yet, get to farming. Pinions come from dormant angels with one spawning every mission. Do Halico perimeter, it's nice and easy in no fail conditions, so you can explore for that Void Plume crest as much as you want, while also looking for the angel spawn. Void Plume quills on the other hand generally come from Melica. You will want to find the Zariman accolades, or the keys as we like to call them, and insert it into the Cephalon console. Mashing X when inserting it will skip the dialogue and give the quill instantly on the ground. Remember to pick it up. Keys are always nearby Melica within about 100 meters, I would say. You can hear them by their distinct higher-pitched humming sound, kind of similar to caches. Lanthorns are just normal resources you can get while running the missions. So the Incarnon system. We have 3 new weapons and every single one of them has evolution trees. You can only change the perks, or evolve as the game likes to say, at Cavallero, an NPC at the Crystallith. You probably noticed by now that you have to unlock them one by one and you get to pick between one of the 3 perks for each evolution. Fret not, if you don't like your choice, you can always click back and change it later. Always go for the full unlocks as the 5th evolution for every weapon completely changes how they play. Let's look at the Phenmor evolution tree and decide what's best. Evolution 1, you need this to activate Incarnon mode. That's it, that's the only choice. Moving on, Evolution 2, this one you can pick based on your tastes, either Void Guidance or Rapid Wrath. For me, this actually depends on what I'm doing. If I'm using a raw damage build, I can use Primary Deadhead Arcane, then I can just slot Stabilizer Exilis for 100% recoil reduction, meaning I would rather run Rapid Wrath. There aren't that many Exilis options, reason being I'll get into later, but if I use a slash build on this weapon, that means I cannot run Deadhead, since with how strong Phenmor is, you are probably bringing a slash Phenmor into Endurance, and raw damage on a slash build cannot kill enemies in Endurance. You need the bleeds, which cannot trigger Deadhead. So you would use Merciless there, meaning you cannot reach 100% recoil reduction unless you use Void's Guidance. That's how you decide. Evolution 3. All the builds I show you today will be focused on spending as much time in Incarnon mode as possible, because on Phenmor it is strictly superior to the normal mode in every way. This actually isn't true for all Incarnon weapons, but it is for Phenmor. The Incarnon mode has infinite ammo and uses a battery system, so the right perk is useless here. This also means the middle perk is useless for a mainly Incarnon mode build. Therefore, I picked the left perk so that I can spam my normal mode shots to build up my meter as fast as possible and get into Incarnon mode without having to worry reloading. Evolution 4. Don't take Elemental Excess. Currently, it scales off base stats of the weapon instead of being flat stats, so it barely does anything. It adds a true 4% status to your Phenmor and removes a 2% crit. Literally useless until it gets patched, if it does get patched. Survival's Edge, I don't know if it's flat or not, but there is a reason we don't want to pick this due to Evolution 5, so I chose Incarnon Efficiency, so we can build the meter faster. Now, Evolution 5, the big one. 50% headshot damage for 8 seconds. Very nice. But favors very fine aiming instead of the bullet hose action, even if you have 100% recoil reduction. It is a sizable buff, but just wait. Enemies suffering from fewer than 3 status effects will receive plus 100% crit damage. This seems like it's good for a raw crit build. The thing is, with how fast this weapon spits out bullets, it's quite hard to not inflict 3 different status effects, so I would not recommend this perk. Devouring Attrition. This is the cream of the crop. Half your non-crits will get a plus 2000% damage buff. We've tested this perk extensively, and the plus 2000% damage is a final multiplier after everything else, meaning you will do 21 times your damage if it procs on non-crits. Think of it like Eclipse. So your non-crits essentially have a 21 times damage multiplier, half the time. or your non-crits become your quote-unquote crits. Therefore, we do not want to build for crit on this weapon, which is why we don't want the left node on Evolution 4. Now, how does Incarnon mode on Phenmor work? Simple, land headshots, charge the meter, press alt fire to change into Incarnon mode and shoot it like normal, press alt fire to change it back to normal mode or if the battery empties. Yes, it's a battery, meaning you have infinite ammo in Incarnon mode, so reload speed and magazine size mods are useless for it. You can only build a meter with headshots when not in Incarnon mode. Interestingly, the meter builds based on damage dealt, not on number of headshots. So the more you build out the weapon, the easier it will become to max out the meter. Most notably, the meter is not built based on damage you visually see on your screen, but on damage it can inflict. Can inflict is important, because for some reason, when you kill an enemy, if you continue to shoot their head for a moment afterwards, it will continue to ramp up your Incarnon bar. This probably has something to do with lingering hitboxes when enemies die before they're removed. A fully built out Phenmor like I showed today should be able to charge an entire meter in 4 to 5 headshots. The Incarnon mode also naturally has 3 meter punch through. There are 2 main ways to build this weapon, raw damage and slash. I would not recommend building slash unless you're looking for endurance level cap, because the weapon is so strong that it's unnecessary otherwise. The corrosive build handles up to level 1000 enemies before you start noticing any damage falloff problems due to armor scaling. The slash build is actually much more interesting though, so let's take a look at that first. This is a special slash build meant for steel path disruption. There were some considerations taken here. The build is meant to be used with arcane acceleration, which provides an additional 90% fire rate buff. And this is meant to be used both against level 9k trash mobs and level 9k devilists. It's meant to be self-priming against trash mobs, which is why it has viral. But you will use a dedicated primer for devilists. This build does not require armor stripping of any enemy, be it trash mobs or the devilists. If you are intending on only using this to fight devilists and have a second weapon to deal with trash mobs, such as a Glaive Prime, then I would drop these 2 viral mods for vigilante armaments and vile acceleration. This is because you can get your viral procs from a proper primer, and if you look here, devilists ignore radiation weight for procs, meaning without viral, your Incarnon mode has 100% slash weight against devilists for crazy amounts of procs. If you are intending on full stripping devilists, I would instead recommend dropping Fanged Fusillade, Hammershot, Malignant Force, and Rhyme Rounds for the 3 mods building viral heat instead, and putting Vile Acceleration in the bottom empty slot. Just keep in mind, this will make it shit at dealing with trash mobs unless you armor strip them as well. Anyways, back to the viral slash build. I'm showing this as the main build because while it isn't the absolute highest DPS build for disruption, unlike the full strip viral heat or the pure slash with a dedicated primer, it's by far the comfiest to use and therefore also the best for steel path survival endurance. The weapon is strong enough you do not actually need a fully optimized DPS build, and rather creating a balanced slash setup that can deal with all scenarios in endurance will suit you a lot better. Fang Fusillade is here because the natural slash weight against trash mobs is low enough it is actually a mandatory mod. It will increase the slash weight from 44 to 63.3% on this build, meaning you get 44% more slash procs, which is a direct 44% total damage increase. It does not increase the damage your slash procs do, just the amount of procs you get. Because I'm assuming we're using Arcane Acceleration on the build combined with Prime Shred, this makes Fang Fusillade actually better than Vile Acceleration in this slot. Also, Vile Acceleration bottoms out your Incarnon battery faster, so Fang Fusillade has better battery economy in Incarnon mode as well. Hammershot is only there to boost the status chance and token crit damage. Crit chance is obviously undesired on this loadout, but crit damage is also a trash stat. I'll get to that in a second. Hammershot buffs our status from 42 to 58%, meaning we get 1.38 times more status procs than before, or another multiplicative 38% more total slash procs, or another 38% total damage increase. Now, let's look at that crit. The weapon crits 20% of the time on this build. When it does, it will do 3.2 times damage instead of 2 times damage when Hammershot is equipped versus an empty slot. 80% of the time, the weapon will not crit, and half of the non-crits do 21 times more damage than normal. So let's normalize the non-crits to doing 10.5 times damage in general. What is the average damage of this weapon? It's the fractional damage provided by the crits, which is 3.2 times 20%, plus the 10.5 times normalized damage of non-crits, times 80%, which is 9.04. This means using hammer shot, ignoring all status, will make the weapon do on average 9.04 times the normal damage. This is heavily due to the plus 2000% total damage increase on the non-crits perk from Evolution 5. Now, what happens if we don't use hammer shot? What is the average damage of Phenmor now with an empty slot here? Well then, we get the base crit multiplier only, so 2 times 20%, plus the 10.5 times normalized damage of non-crits times 80%, which is 8.8. So ignoring the statuses, slotting hammer shot, which grants 60% crit damage only boosts the total damage of the weapon average from 8.8 to 9.04, or a 2.8 times total damage increase. This is why said crit damage stat on hammer shot is useless, and why crit damage in general on this build is useless, and by extension why we aren't using Vital Sense either. This is news for you, Laetum, which would only be a 5.6% total damage increase. TLDR, do not build crit chance or crit damage on Phenmor. I just have no better mod that gives status chance than hammer shot here. The viral mods are unranked to preserve as high slash weight as possible. Viral procs are useless after 10 stacks, so you don't want to proc too much of it since it will prevent you from proccing more slash. In endurance runs, you will probably be shooting enemies for a full 1-2 seconds at level cap to kill them with this build, so the super low viral weight is enough to proc a bunch with sustained fire. If you for some reason want to bring this slash build into base steel path, which I would not recommend, then I would run a rank 3 malignant force instead. Enemies in base steel path should die to less than half a second of shooting this weapon. Therefore, you need a bit more viral weight to make sure viral actually procs enough, instead of just getting slash and wasting mod slots on the weapon. But honestly, for base steel path, I would recommend using the corrosive build I'll show you after. You might be wondering why I'm using Prime Shred instead of Vile Acceleration. Better battery economy is the only answer. This weapon doesn't have problems killing Demoless either, so I'd rather not overshoot and preserve as much Incarnon mode as possible. The TTK is already good enough. The weapon also has an 3 meter punch through on the Incarnon mode, which can normally shoot through 5 humanoid enemies. That should be more than enough, and though Prime Shred pushes this to 5.2 meters, which makes you able to shoot through 8 enemies, or literally down entire hallways, and nothing will ever stop your shots. It's up to you on which one you want to use, take your pick. Both Vile and Prime Shred are fine. Now, since this is a slash build for endurance, we're slotting primary Merciless. Stabilizer Excellence alone only gets us the 60% recoil reduction, and this is why I recommend Void's Guidance on Evolution 2 if you're using slash to get 100% recoil removal and perfect headshots, which will be important for Demolists. You can use whatever primer you want on these kind of loadouts, such as an Epitaph, or a Compressor. Even beams like Nucor or Spectra are fine. Just have a primer for the Demolist ready to stack as many different status effects as possible, because Gun Seal does work on this weapon for both fire modes. It's additive like normal, and important to use since our only other source of base damage is our weapon Arcane. Primed Bane is self-explanatory for the double dip. There are no funky interactions here. You literally do 21 times total damage on non-crits half the time. There you go for the first build. Now, let's look at the second build. The first thing you'll notice are polarity problems. This empty slot is meant to be Vile Acceleration, but since I can't fit it, I will simulate it with Arcane Acceleration, again on my frame. Now, unlike the first build, which is meant for endurance, must be run with Arcane Acceleration, and is meant to be used with a primer for Demolists, but you don't prime trash mobs, this second build has no such limitations. It's a standalone build meant for generic steel path that will wreck everything and does not care about what else you bring on your loadout. Because it's a raw damage build, we have primary deadhead for a headshot multiplier and 50% recoil reduction, meaning we can pair it with Evolution 2's Rapid Wrath for a bonus fire rate, since Stabilizer in the Excellus can remove all recoil. The corrosive build is literally the definition of a bullet hose, with Vile Acceleration, Prime Shred, and also 20% fire rate from Evolution 2. Luckily, with how easy it is to charge the meter, this isn't really an issue. Since we do not want to build crits, this once again opens up more slots on the build, and is the reason why I use 3 elemental mods for corrosive and heats. You won't normally see me using 3 elemental mods on most weapons. And Vigilante Armaments gives too small of a multi-shot bonus when Galvanized Chamber is in play to be worth it on the build, which is the reason why I use Vile Acceleration. And we really don't want the Vigilante set bonus to proc for bonus crits either. If you don't have or don't want to slot the Primed Bane or regular Bane, then you can freely slot Amalgam Serration for the extra sprint speed here instead. There aren't that many other viable mods to put here, so building for some quality of life while also getting a tiny bit more base damage despite diminishing returns is still an option. As you can see, the raw damage build is a lot more simplistic since it does not care about status distribution weights or status chance to maximize the amount of slash procs you can get out of the weapon. This is probably the build you will have for everyday use since it becomes a laser pointed with the amount of fire rate it has, and builds up the Incarnon meter extremely easily while still having 100% recoil reduction. The super high fire rate means you can land all 4 or 5 headshots in the normal mode needed to charge in just a second or two as well. Hopefully this has opened up the light on what you can do with the new Incarnon weapons and shows why Phenmor is now the strongest rifle in the game. Each of the new Incarnons are unique and have very different build paths, so make sure to stay tuned for my next video on the Laetum pistol. Which one felt the best to use to you? If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 79.5% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to get you new information out always as soon as possible, like I've done with covering Garuda's rework and the Angels of Zariman update. Stick around if you want to see interesting memes and builds on a nearly daily basis. Don't miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching and see you all next time.